Lee Ha-meng's internal injuries were so severe that his body threatened to collapse at any moment, yet he forced himself onward. Gritting through the pain, he rushed toward the training ground, where he saw cultists closing in from outside. Using the last of his strength, he reached Patriarch Cheon Yeowun and barely managed to drop to one knee before him. Cheon Yeowun demanded to know the enemy's location. Ha-meng coughed violently as he reported that the minor priest was engaged in battle with warriors from the 6 Berserk Saber warriors in front of the manual library and urged that they hurry. The moment the words left him, his consciousness faded and his body collapsed. Great Guardian Markham immediately rushed to Ha-meng's side, quickly examining his condition before reporting that Ha-meng had fainted due to severe internal injuries. Upon learning the identity of the intruder, Cheon Yeowun's expression darkened and he moved to rush toward the library. Markham stepped in front of him and stopped him, urging him to wait. Cheon Yeowun reacted sharply, demanding to know what he was doing and glaring at him for daring to block his path. Markham dropped to his knees and stated that he would go first. He then sent a telepathic message, asking Cheon Yeowun to prioritize his own safety, reminding him that he had not fully recovered from his previous battle. After a brief pause, Cheon Yeowun agreed and ordered the 4th Elder and the 10th Elder to accompany Markham. Both elders immediately bowed and acknowledged the command. After sending them ahead, the Lord moved toward the library with the warriors and noticed a satchel that Lee Ha-meng had dropped along the way. True to his title as the Wind God, Great Guardian Markham reached the library far faster than the other elders. The sight before him made him falter. He had expected to find Cheon Yeowun struggling against a warrior of the 6 Berserk Saber warriors. Yet what unfolded before his eyes shattered that assumption. Cheon Yeowun surged through the enemy like a streak of black light, his movement swift and absolute. Markham could not comprehend what he was witnessing. The sword formation Yeowun displayed appeared flawless, without a single opening. Even more shocking was the weapon in Yeowun's hand. Its deep, dark presence radiated an unfamiliar aura, and Markham immediately recognized it as a legendary sword. His eyes trembled beneath his mask as the realization struck him, and the name of the weapon echoed repeatedly in his mind as he struggled to grasp the truth. At that moment, the black sword scattered apart and reassembled itself as an arm guard around Yeowun's wrist. Yeowun sensed Markham's presence and stiffened as he turned toward him, his lips tightening as the weight of what might have been seen settled heavily on him. The 4th Elder arrived soon after and halted in disbelief when he saw Cheon Yeowun standing atop Hyun-sa's lifeless body. Shock coursed through him as he grasped the meaning of the scene before him, unable to reconcile how Yeowun could have defeated a master of the 6 Berserk Saber warriors alone. Unlike him, the 10th Elder, Yin Moha, immediately approached Yeowun and checked on his condition. Yeowun confirmed that he was unharmed. Markham also stepped forward, expressing his relief at seeing the minor priest safe, and Yeowun responded with calm gratitude. Not long after, the Lord arrived at the library along with the remaining warriors. Cheon Yeowun stepped forward and knelt before the Patriarch. Even as he lowered himself, unease stirred within him as he recalled that the Royal Guardians were meant to uphold the will of the Sword Demon, while Great Guardian Markham was known as the Patriarch's right-hand man. The possibility that Markham might report everything he had witnessed weighed heavily on his mind. Cheon Yeowun demanded an explanation for what had occurred. Markham reported that by the time he arrived, the minor priest had already dealt with the enemy from the 6 Berserk Saber warriors. Cheon Yeowun did not respond immediately. Instead, he silently examined the situation, recognizing that the enemy had not simply been pierced through, but had been overwhelmed by a succession of codified fighting forms. The realization that Yeowun had concealed such immense skill all along led him to acknowledge inwardly that Yeowun was not someone to be underestimated. Afterward, Cheon Yeowun proceeded with Markham to the underground vault beneath the manual library. This incident exposed the existence of the hidden treasure vault that the Guardians had kept secret for generations. Cheon Yeowun questioned whether the intruders had been targeting that place. Markham hesitated in silence, prompting Cheon Yeowun to repeat the question with irritation. Markham then admitted that the intruders had indeed been after the vault. Cheon Yeowun descended into the vault, only to find it completely emptied. Nothing remained except faint traces of something that had been burned away. His fists clenched as fury and humiliation surged within him. He realized that the Sword Demon's manuals might have been destroyed, that such a hidden place had existed within the academy without his knowledge, and that an outside enemy had been aware of a secret he himself did not know. The weight of having been taken lightly settled heavily upon him. Meanwhile, Yeowun examined the contents of the satchel and was struck by what he found inside. He questioned his earlier assumption that the intruders had been pursuing the manuals simply because they were remnants of the Sword Demon. The realization dawned that they had instead been after the Berserk Saber God's saber marks. The fact that they already knew of the 24 Demon Sword deepened his confusion, as those who called themselves descendants of the Berserk Saber God, their their need to obtain his blade marks made no sense to him, leaving Yeowun questioning their true identity and the real nature of the 6 Berserk Saber warriors. The incident sent shockwaves throughout the city of the demonic cult. The bodies of the fallen warriors were gathered, and with the threat of further enemy infiltration looming over the cult's territory, all available manpower endured sleepless nights in search of clues. Despite their efforts, nothing was discovered beyond the existence of those 4 men. Within the great banquet hall, hundreds of guards stood watch over a single group. They were guests from the Murim Alliance. Frustration weighed heavily on Mo Young-kang as he questioned how much longer they would be detained. Poon Chung-won urged patience, emphasizing the need to prove their innocence for the sake of the Alliance. Jiggle Sohee added that they had already conveyed all the information they possessed, and that the demonic cult would reach its own conclusion in time, asking only for a little more patience. Though displeased, Mo Young-kang accepted the explanation, and the matter was left at that. As calm returned on the surface, clarity finally settled within Jiggle Sohee's mind. She realized with bitterness that she had been manipulated. After failing to recover on Hue, they had traveled south to regroup with the adepts residing in Jiangxi, only to be ambushed by a group of strangers. By the time she regained consciousness, they had already become part of the Murim Alliance's march. Until the hypnosis had worn off, she had mistaken those enemies for bodyguards who had always accompanied them. They had targeted her precisely because she had been moving in secrecy for the sake of the Alliance. Only those present at the meeting of the adepts had known of this movement, which meant that one of the 17 Murim adepts was a spy for the enemy. She understood that the alliance had to be firmly established before they returned, as the attack on the minor priest ensured that they would not be released easily. While Jiggle Sohee remained lost in these thoughts, Demon Dr. Baek Jong-woo continued examining those who had been placed under hypnosis. The doctors assisting Baek Jong-woo reported that there were no abnormalities in those under his care, and Jong-woo acknowledged their findings. As he continued his examination, he reflected that he had been certain there would be physical changes after learning they had been placed under hypnosis. However, aside from their pulses beating slightly slower than normal, there was nothing unusual about their condition. Another doctor, who had inspected the food served at the banquet, approached Baek Jong-woo and informed him that no poison had been found in any of the food or drinks. Jong-woo accepted the report calmly, noting that this result aligned with his expectations. He recalled the minor priest's suspicion that poison in the food or drink might have triggered the hypnosis, but it now appeared that assumption had been incorrect. With a quiet sigh, Jong-woo's attention was drawn to the sudden movement in the hall as all the warriors bowed in unison to the figure who had just entered. Jong-woo also bowed respectfully, greeting the minor priest. Cheon Yeowun expressed his gratitude for Jong-woo's efforts and asked whether any progress had been made. Jong-woo shook his head and explained that they had thoroughly examined the food and drinks as instructed, but found no trace of poison. Yeowun sought confirmation that nothing had been discovered in either the food or the drinks, and Jong-woo reaffirmed that there was nothing. As Yeowun processed this, a troubling thought surfaced within him. If the hypnosis could truly be triggered by a single clap, then everyone present in the banquet hall should have been affected. Yeowun then requested to examine the situation himself. Jong-woo agreed and nodded, though he let out a sigh. The doctors had investigated without rest throughout the night, yet Yeowun still seemed unwilling to accept the conclusion they had reached. Yeowun fell into deep thought as his gaze settled on a glass and a liquor bottle. His mind returned to the moment when the hypnotizer had struck the glass against the bottle, and with that recollection, he reached out and picked up the glass. As he retraced the sequence in his head, a sudden realization struck him, prompting him to examine the glass and the chopsticks more closely. He immediately issued an order to NANO, asking it to check whether there was any poison or unfamiliar substance on either the chopsticks or the glass. NANO responded by instructing him to touch the objects with his fingers to begin the analysis. Baek Jong-woo and the other doctors watched in confusion, unable to understand what Yeowun was attempting to do. Yeowun moved methodically from table to table, running his fingers over every pair of chopsticks and every glass. At certain seats, he deliberately turned the glasses upside down. After completing his inspection of the tables, he approached the hypnotized warriors from the Yeowun clan and asked whether they remembered where they had been seated the previous night. Upon receiving confirmation, he instructed them to return to their original seats. Though uncertain of his intentions, they complied, knowing they needed to prove their innocence, and sat down where they had been the night before. As Baek Jong-woo and the other doctors observed the scene, confusion turned into shock. Every warrior from the Yeowun clan had taken a seat where Yeowun had earlier placed a glass upside down. Yeowun then asked Baek Jong-woo to smell the part of the cup that would come into contact with the lips. After hesitating briefly, Jong-woo followed the instruction and tested it with his tongue. His expression changed instantly as he muttered in disbelief that it was opium. Shock surged through Baek Jong-woo as he stared at Yeowun, unable to reconcile how he had uncovered the truth, and and questioning whether this was truly the same Prince Cheon Yeowun he had known years ago. Moments later, within the Patriarch's quarters of the demonic cult, Cheon Yeowun trained alone inside his private training room. When the session ended, he emerged drenched in sweat. His servants immediately attended to him, removing his clothes and wiping his body with warm, damp towels before dressing him in a fresh robe. Once prepared, the Patriarch moved deeper into the palace and descended to the underground level. He opened one of the 6 steel doors, and a wave of cold air spilled outward. At the center of the chamber stood a table holding severed arms and preserved skins that had once been stored within the underground vault. Cheon Yeowun placed his hand upon a preserved arm etched with blade markings and slowly closed his eyes. As he traced the marks, he envisioned the blade movements that had carved them and distinctly felt the power and intent of the sword technique used. The blade will embedded within the markings felt painfully familiar, matching the sensation he had once felt from that man. The memory tightened his chest as his thoughts returned to the figure who had appeared just before he was about to kill a claw technique user in Zhejiang, the same man who had left him wounded by an otherworldly power. He recalled the final words spoken to him, words that denied him outright. The memory ignited his fury. Cheon Yeowun slammed his hand down onto the table, and cracks spread across its surface as rage surged through him at the humiliation he had suffered. At that moment, a heavy knock echoed against the steel door. Cheon Yeowun identified the visitor as Great Guardian Markham and informed him that he would come up to the office. After receiving acknowledgement, Cheon Yeowun ascended to the Patriarch's office. There he seated himself upon the lavish throne and raised his hand, signaling Great Guardian Markham to begin his report. Great Guardian Markham proceeded to report everything that had occurred during the investigation within the castle. After listening, Cheon Yeowun questioned what had been done with the evidence that had been removed. Markham reported that he had taken the jade bottles secretly removed from the banquet hall and disposed of them deep within a valley of the 10,000 Great Mountains in Ujeol. Cheon Yeowun confirmed that no one would be able to recover them, and Markham assured him that after washing the bottles, he had shattered them and cast the fragments into the lake within the valley. Satisfied, Cheon Yeowun praised the action, recognizing that the discovery of the bottles would provide the demonic cult with leverage over the poison sect in the upcoming alliance. He then asked whether Physician Bake and the rest of his staff were still conducting their investigation. Markham confirmed that they were. Cheon Yeowun noted that with the minor priest now involved in the investigation and strategist Jiggle observing, there would be no room for objections. He ordered that the physicians be dismissed and that the people of Marine be detained. Markham immediately accepted the command. At that moment, one of the guards announced that Physician Bake wished to request an audience. Cheon Yeowun approved the timing and ordered him to be sent in. Jongwoo entered and knelt, expressing gratitude for being granted an audience. Cheon Yeowun asked about the outcome of the investigation. Bake Jongwoo reported that the cause of the hypnosis had been identified and produced a cup, placing it upon the table. He explained that a significant amount of hallucinogenic substances, including opium, had been discovered remaining on the cups. Alarm flared within Markham as he realized his oversight. With limited time, he had only managed to dispose of the bottles and had not considered that the cups themselves would be brought in as evidence. Cheon Yeowun also fell into troubled thought, recognizing that he should have involved Physician Bake earlier. His attempt to make the investigation appear natural had resulted in a loose end he now had to confront. Cheon Yeowun asked who had discovered the evidence. Bake Jongwoo reported that it had been the minor priest, whose sharp observation had led to the clue. Cheon Yeowun's expression darkened, frustration surfacing as his plan began to unravel with this revelation. Jongwoo explained that consuming such drugs caused hallucinations, and that someone skilled in hypnosis could easily exploit that state. However, he pointed out a critical inconsistency. Cheon Yeowun immediately identified it as the quantity used. Bake Jongwoo confirmed that a far greater amount would have been required to induce hypnosis, yet the alcohol inside the jade bottles had been completely clean. Because of this, the minor priest had suggested that the bottles might have been secretly switched and proposed inspecting the remaining jade bottles throughout the city. Before Bake Jongwoo could continue, Cheon Yeowun interrupted and summoned the Great Guardian. He declared that the method behind the illusion had already been uncovered and ordered that the guests be released. He further instructed that the minor priest be told to cease any further investigation. The Great Guardian acknowledged the command and left the office. Only then did realization strike Bake Jongwoo. He understood that the Patriarch himself had hidden the bottles away. He recognized that he had been about to report the possibility of a spy among those inspecting the food, but saw that such a report was no longer necessary. Elsewhere, within the palace's kitchen storage, Yeowun was inspecting the jade bottles alongside the staff when Great Guardian Markham arrived and brought the inspection to a halt. Yeowun insisted that there could still be spies involved, but Markham stopped him and explained that everything had unfolded according to the Patriarch's original plan. He revealed that the orders had been to hide the Patriarch's jade bottles from the start. heart. As Yeowun absorbed this, he realized that Cheon Yeowun had orchestrated everything amid the chaos itself. The thought did not surprise him entirely, given the Patriarch's reputation as a master strategist, especially after having used Yeowun as bait within the academy. Cheon Yeowun asked Great Guardian Markim whether he had known about the plan from the beginning. Markim responded by nodding in confirmation. Yeowun then stated that this meant Markim was the one who had disposed of the jade bottles, and Markim acknowledged it without hesitation. Yeowun remarked that if it had been him, he would not have disposed of all the jade bottles aside from the cups. Markim asked whether Yeowun had another approach in mind. Yeowun explained that if the bottles had been analyzed, they could have discovered a way to counter the method used, ensuring that such an incident would not happen again, and he offered an apology for giving unsolicited advice. Yeowun placed the jar back in its place and stated that he would take his leave. As he walked away, he reflected inwardly that although it was regrettable that the Patriarch's plan had not come to fruition, discovering the remnants of the drugs might prove beneficial when considering the future. Elsewhere, members of the Murim Alliance reacted with visible relief. Having feared that their innocence would never be proven, they were finally freed once evidence confirmed that they had been hypnotized. Poon Chung-won expressed his relief, remarking that it was fortunate their suspicions had been cleared, and Mo Young-kang nodded, though he spoke with lingering discomfort. He reasoned that their release was likely due to the demonic cult being unable to undo the alliance for the sake of their own safety, as they could no longer afford to oppose the Murim Alliance. Poon Chung-won acknowledged that the point made sense. However, Jiggle Sohee held a different view. She believed inwardly that the demonic cult could have exploited the incident to gain the upper hand in the alliance. Yet the fact that they had chosen to step back must have been due to Yeowun, the minor priest. Yeowun had chosen not to conceal the truth and instead acted for the greater cause. Jiggle Sohee realized that had Yeowun not intervened, the situation could have devolved into a bloodbath, exactly as the Six Berserk Saber Warriors had intended. She recognized Yeowun as someone capable of bringing change to the demonic cult and resolved inwardly that Murim now stood indebted to him, vowing that the debt would be repaid to the minor priest. 4 days had passed since the ambush by the Six Berserk Saber Warriors, and during that time, the alliance between the demonic cult and the righteous faction of Murim had been formally established. The announcement was delivered to all members of the cult, yet dissatisfaction spread throughout the demonic cult due to the long history of hostility between them and the righteous Murim factions. Inside the Great Hall, Cheon Yeowun addressed Jiggle Sohee, stating that he had heard she would be departing that day and advising her not to concern herself with the opinions of the cult's people if their reaction was the reason. Jiggle Sohee responded that their early departure had nothing to do with the cult and was instead due to other pressing matters, expressing her gratitude for the hospitality they had received. However, the true reason for their departure lay elsewhere. It stemmed from Jiggle Sohee's claims. Although the two leaders had not accepted her words immediately, she began recounting everything from the moment of her kidnapping, carefully pointing out every suspicious detail. As her explanation continued, the leaders and members of the alliance realized that something was indeed amiss, prompting them to decide on an early return. Jiggle Sohee then formally presented an official invitation to the demonic cult, an invitation to the Murim tournament issued in the name of their lord. Cheon Yeowun acknowledged it and stated that the demonic cult would certainly attend now that the alliance had been formed. Jiggle Sohee expressed her thanks in return. At that moment, Great Guardian Markim informed Cheon Yeowun that noon was approaching and that it was time for him to head to the public hall to deliver his speech. Cheon Yeowun acknowledged the reminder. Seeing this, Poon Chung-won remarked that the Patriarch appeared busy and stated that they would also take their leave. Cheon Yeowun accepted this and wished them safe travels. As they departed, Cheon Yeowun was left deep in thought. He reasoned that their haste was understandable, as there could be a spy from the Six Berserk Saber Warriors among them, leaving them no time to linger. At midnight, within the guest house of the Flying Phantom sect, Yeowun gathered with his followers for a meeting. Hobum voiced his frustration, questioning why the Patriarch had officially announced every other matter, yet failed to publicly declare Yeowun's ascension to the minor priesthood. Wang Hyul agreed, stating that something about the situation felt wrong. Samachuk added that announcements made at the public hall were meant to formalize all important decisions from the Grand Hall meeting, and that the only missing declaration was Yeowun's elevation to the minor priesthood. Hwan Yi suggested that this omission might indicate that the Patriarch had a change of heart regarding the decision. Bakesji countered by pointing out that Yeowun Yeowun had completed the entire process, having won the tournament and secured witnesses, and questioned whether such a decision could truly be reversed so easily. Hwan Yi admitted uncertainty, but reasoned that unless all 6 main sects opposed it, the Patriarch held the authority to overturn nearly any decision within the cult. Yeowun concluded that this meant his status as minor priest could be revoked as long as there was no outrage or formal objection. As Hwan Yi observed him, he noted that Yeowun showed no emotional reaction to the situation and spoke as though it did not concern him at all. Hwan Yi stated that he had intended to mention the matter later, but decided that this was the right moment. He explained that they had remained in constant contact with the remaining forces of the Shadow Sect in an effort to recruit them. Yeowun acknowledged that he was aware of this. Hwan Yi then revealed that when they returned to the Shadow Sect's manor the previous night, not a single person had been present. Yeowun reacted with surprise and questioned whether the other 4 remaining sects had already made their move. Hwan Yi clarified that this was only partially correct, explaining that it was actually the Patriarch's men who had acted. Yeowun frowned as he realized that Hwan Yi was referring to the warriors who worked directly under the Patriarch. Hwan Yi confirmed this and reported that half of the Shadow Sect's remaining forces had been assigned to the Sword Sect, while the other half had been assigned to the Saber Sect. Samachuk reacted with visible frustration, interpreting this as the Patriarch using the Shadow Sect's strength to bolster the Sword and Saber sects, and questioned whether this was a blatant attempt to suppress Yeowun's growing power. Yeowun calmly denied that interpretation. He explained that the Patriarch was not suppressing his power, but instead maintaining balance. His explanation left Samachuk and the others stunned. Yeowun elaborated that by strengthening those 2 sects, they would inevitably keep a close watch on him, resulting in an equilibrium of power. He further explained that the Patriarch's decision not to officially announce his ascension to the minor priesthood was a deliberate signal to the remaining 4 sects that they still had a chance. In doing so, the Patriarch was deliberately fanning the flames, pushing Yeowun into direct conflict with the other 4 sects. Hobom reacted in disbelief, unable to comprehend how the Patriarch could act in such a manner. Hwan Yi, however, reflected inwardly that they had finally grasped the Patriarch's true nature. The Patriarch he knew was cold-hearted, devoid of any affection even toward his own bloodline, treating everyone as expendable pieces in a grand design meant solely to consolidate his authority. Yeowun's followers fell into grim contemplation, realizing that the Patriarch was not truly their ally, and questioning what course of action remained open to them. At that moment, Yeowun rose from his seat and addressed everyone gathered before him. He asked whether they would trust him and follow him, regardless of what might come. Shock rippled through the group as they immediately understood the weight of his question. Yeowun was asking whether they would stand by him even if he chose to move against the Lord himself. Yeowun stated that there were many things fundamentally wrong within the demonic cult. He declared his intention to lead the cult back to its origins, to the ideals that existed when the demonic lord had first founded it, even if doing so meant challenging the current authority that ruled over them. He then bowed deeply, asking them to place their trust in him and follow him on that path. Hobom was the first to respond, striking his fist into his palm as he proclaimed his unwavering loyalty, declaring that no matter which path Yeowun chose, he would always follow behind him. Others quickly followed. Wang Hul affirmed his resolve as well, stating that even if the road ahead was filled with calamity, pain, and bloodshed, he was prepared to follow Yeowun wherever he went. Soon, all of Yeowun's followers pledged in unison that they would remain by his side. Yeowun returned their vow with a bow of his own, a faint smile forming on his face. Hwan Yi then asked what their next move would be, expressing doubt that the remaining 4 sects would accept this situation quietly. Yeowun agreed and concluded that they would have to abandon everything they had previously planned. Hwan Yi asked whether Yeowun had any ideas, his tone carrying a light edge. Yeowun answered that since the Patriarch was attempting to balance their power, he would have to break that balance himself. After saying this, Yeowun turned his attention to Moon Ku, prompting a brief look of confusion from him. Hwan Yi immediately understood Yeowun's intention and reasoned that this meant Yeowun planned to head to the Demonic Dragon Palm sect to recruit them and bolster their forces. Yeowun confirmed this plan. Hwan Yi then proposed that he would accompany Elder Sema to the Dream Phantom Sword sect to meet their chief Mong O, noting that Elder Sema and Elder Mong shared a close bond from their time in the same academy cohort. Yeowun agreed to this arrangement. Yeowun then stated that he would travel with Elder Yin and Mun Ku and instructed Wang Hul to take the remaining followers and work on recruiting the other neutral sects. At that point, Hobom loudly expressed his desire to accompany Yeowun as well. Yeowun initially hesitated addressing Hobum, but quickly realized that Hobum had no intention of backing down. Accepting this, Yeowun granted him permission to come along, which immediately filled Hobum with visible delight. Wang Hul then suggested that Baek Ji should accompany Yeowun as well. Yeowun questioned whether the two of them would be sufficient on Wang Hul's side. In response, Wang Hul confidently assured him that it would be more than enough, even nudging Samachuk as he did so. With a smirk, Wang Hul reminded Baek Ji to take especially good care of their lord. Baek Ji reacted dismissively, clearly unimpressed by Wang Hul's attitude. Moments later, in the northwestern region of the demonic cult city, within the manor of the demonic Dragon Palm sect, urgency swept through the grounds. A man sprinted across the courtyard and rushed through the gates toward the sect leader's office. Bursting inside, he urgently announced his presence and delivered his report, revealing that the minor priest had requested an audience. The news stunned the 8th elder, Mun Yun, who immediately rushed out of his office. Without delay, he ordered all staff to be gathered and instructed them to make thorough preparations to receive the guest, emphasizing that everything had to be flawless before the minor priest's arrival. The staff responded at once and moved to carry out the preparations. As the guest house was being readied, Munku led Yeowun and the others into the expansive garden courtyard of the manor. He introduced the garden as the pride of the demonic Dragon Palm sect. Hobum gazed around in amazement, impressed by the care and effort that had clearly gone into maintaining the grounds. Munku explained that tending to the garden was his grandfather's sole hobby, a detail that reflected the attention devoted to the space. Not long after, Mun Yun personally came out to receive them. He formally greeted Yeowun and introduced himself as the 8th elder of the demonic Dragon Palm sect. Yeowun responded with a respectful bow, returning the greeting to Elder Mun. Mun Yun noticed that Munku was still wearing a mask. Since they were outside the academy, she had been advised to remove it, but she had not done so yet, feeling embarrassed because the sect members were unaware that she was a woman. Mun Yun then cleared his throat and stated that he wished to personally escort the minor priest to the guest house. Yeowun responded that such effort was unnecessary, but expressed his gratitude for the hospitality. As they proceeded toward the guest house, Busong, the guard stationed at the front gate, hurried over to Mun Yun and urgently addressed him. Mun Yun asked what the matter was, and Busong reported that the 3rd elder, 4th elder, and Prince Mukum were currently waiting to see him. Mun Yun frowned upon hearing this. Yeowun told Mun Yun that he should feel free to attend to his own matters and assured him that there was no need to worry about them. Mun Yun thanked Yeowun for his consideration. He then instructed Busong to escort the guests waiting at the front gate to another building, stating that he would head there after finishing escorting the minor priest. Busong immediately acknowledged the order. In front of the building prepared for Yeowun, there was a small garden with a pond, and a gazebo stood beside it. Inside the gazebo, a round table had been set with desserts and tea. Yeowun remarked on the beauty of the manor, noting that it was easy to understand why Mun Yun was praised for his sense of landscaping aesthetics. Mun Yun responded with light laughter, dismissing the praise as nothing more than a simple personal hobby, and mentioned that the food had already been prepared, suggesting they continue their conversation over the small feast. Yeowun expressed his thanks for the hospitality. Hobum reacted in amazement as he looked at the table, which was filled with a wide variety of snacks and fruits. As he observed the spread, unease crept into his thoughts. He recalled that every meeting with other elders had ended in trouble, and although this visit seemed smooth so far, doubt lingered. Remembering that the chief of the demonic Dragon Palm sect had a granddaughter, and that Munku had mentioned having a twin sibling, suspicion took root. He worried that this meeting might follow the same pattern as their visit to the warrior dance sect, with another attempt to bind Yeowun through marriage. Mun Yun calmly redirected the moment, indicating it was time to continue their discussion. Suddenly, loud commotion erupted near the gate leading into the guest house yard. Voices protested that there were already guests present, while others forcefully insisted that the matter was urgent. Mun Yun frowned as the source of the disturbance came into view. The 3rd elder, who was also the chief of the Saber sect, the 4th elder, chief of the Stealth sect, and Cheon Mukum, a minor priest candidate of the Stealth sect, appeared. Though initially guided toward another building, they abruptly turned and entered the yard. Yeowun fixed them with a cold gaze as they approached. Mun Yun apologized to Yeowun and asked to be excused for a moment. Yeowun acknowledged this with a nod. Mun Yun bowed politely as he approached them and offered a formal greeting to the elders and to Mukum. His tone then hardened as he questioned their conduct, reminding them that he had clearly asked them to wait until he had finished entertaining his current guest, and demanding an explanation for their blatant insolence. The 3rd elder explained that upon hearing of the minor priest's presence, he had felt compelled to rush over despite the impropriety, offering an apology for the rudeness and requesting permission to greet the minor priest. Mun Yun hesitated but ultimately granted his approval. Reluctantly, Mun Yun allowed them forward, and the 2 elders, along with Mukum, approached the gazebo. though. The third elder introduced himself as Bu Cheon, while the fourth elder identified himself as Gyeongja, both offering formal greetings to the minor priest. Yeowun paid neither of them any attention, his gaze instead locked coldly onto Mukum. Mukum flinched under that stare and bowed stiffly. Despite his outward show of respect, resentment churned within him as he seethed at the humiliation of bowing to someone he regarded with contempt. With visible reluctance, he offered his greeting to the minor priest. Cheon remarked that he had been unaware Yeowun had business with Elder Mun that day, explaining that his own visit was prompted by matters requiring discussion. Gyeongja added that they had also come to receive an answer from Mun Yun. Mun Yun questioned what he meant by that. Gyeongja responded evasively, suggesting that Mun Yun not place him in an uncomfortable position. A knowing smirk crossed his face as he hinted that Mun Yun surely had not forgotten the messenger hawk they had recently sent. Mun Yun showed visible surprise and attempted to respond, but Gyeongja cut him off, reminding him that he had agreed to consider the matter. It was because of that very response Gyeongja stated that young Lord Mukum had come, seeking a meeting with Mun Yun's granddaughter. Mun Yun was struck with alarm as he realized inwardly that he had only said he would think the matter over to avoid rejecting the offer outright, never imagining that his response would be taken as consent. At that moment, Yeowun intervened and addressed Elder Moon directly. Mun Yun responded at once, acknowledging him. Yeowun then rose from his seat and stated that if marriage was being discussed, the individuals directly involved should also have a say in the matter. Understanding the intent behind Yeowun's words, Mun Yun's expression brightened, and he readily agreed, stating that he respected his granddaughter's decision. Gyeongja observed the exchange with a narrowed gaze and warned that Elder Mun was treading a dangerous line. He pointed out that while Mun Yun claimed to respect his granddaughter's wishes, the real test would be whether he could uphold those words when the marriage involved the patriarch's son. At that moment, Mun-ku, who had been seated beside Yeowun, stood up and stepped forward. Confusion spread among those present as they noticed her movement. Mukum reacted with surprise when he saw her rise. As Mun-ku reached up and grasped the underside of her chin, she pulled firmly, and the sight that followed stunned everyone present. The layer of skin peeled away, revealing that it had been a mask. Gasps erupted from Yeowun's followers, the two elders, and Mukum alike as the truth was laid bare. Beneath the mask was a smooth, pale face framed by crescent-shaped eyes, her beauty fully revealed. Mun-ku then bowed calmly toward the elders and Mukum, and formally introduced herself as Mun-ku, the granddaughter of Elder Mun Yun. Even Baek-ji, who rarely showed emotion, was left stunned and unable to react. Hobum's mouth hung wide open in shock as disbelief filled his mind, briefly making him wonder if he was dreaming. That illusion shattered as memories flooded back, moments when he had shamelessly stripped naked and walked around confidently in front of Mun-ku, along with countless other incidents. His face drained of color as despair overtook him. Overwhelmed, he covered his face and turned away. Mukum cursed inwardly, regretting the words he had once spoken to Mun-ku back at the academy. Gyeongja, on the other hand, laughed inwardly, marveling that he had never realized Mun Yun's granddaughter had been wearing a skin mask all along. He acknowledged her beauty and even thought that if he had a granddaughter like her, he would have made her do the same. Cheon patted Mukum on the back and remarked that he was fortunate, pointing out how beautiful his potential wife was. Mukum, however, reacted with visible unease and called out to his uncle. Mun-ku then smiled and turned her gaze toward Mukum. As she looked at him, memories resurfaced from their time together at the academy, recalling something he had once said to her back then. Cheon reacted with interest upon learning that the two had spoken before, remarking that this only made the situation better. Mukum immediately tried to object, but Mun-ku calmly continued. She stated that after rejecting the young lord and his proposal, he had declared that once he became the minor priest, he would completely eliminate the demonic Dragon Palm sect, adding that it was fortunate he never attained that position. Cheon was stunned by the revelation. Mukum struck his own head and lowered his gaze as shame overtook him. At the same time, a violent surge of internal energy erupted from the 8th elder, Mun Yun, his fury spilling into the air. Mun Yun demanded to know whether Mukum truly intended to eradicate the demonic Dragon Palm sect. Gyeongja quickly attempted to defuse the situation, suggesting that the young lord had merely spoken foolishly in his youth. Mun Yun rejected that notion outright, questioning whether such words could truly be dismissed as a careless slip of the tongue. Cheon glared at Mun Yun and accused him of baring his fangs over the matter. Mun Yun returned the glare, declaring that at this moment there was nothing he was unwilling to do. As two warriors at the superior master level released their power, the gazebo trembled under the pressure. Seeing the situation escalate, Gyeongja stepped between them, urging both sides to put aside their anger. He stated that he understood Mun Yun's position, but reiterated that Mukum's words had likely been meaningless remarks from the past, carrying no real intent. He further added that even Mun Yun knew there were few within the cult capable of easily confronting the demonic Dragon Palm sect. With a sharp huff, Moon-yoon's anger eased slightly. Gyeongja remarked that he had heard Moon-yoon had been searching for a skilled physician for several years. He stated that if Moon-yoon's granddaughter were to marry Mukum, he would offer a jade medallion as a wedding gift, one that would grant an audience with the divine physician, and asserted that he would never lie about such a matter. Moon-yoon's eyes trembled in shock at the declaration. At that moment, Cheon sent a telepathic message to Gyeongja, praising the move and admitting that even he had not considered using that approach. Gyeongja replied that successful political maneuvering required knowing exactly what the other party desired and satisfying that desire to obtain the desired outcome in return. With NANO's assistance, Yeowun heard the entire exchange. Moon-yoon questioned why such a priceless item would be offered as nothing more than a wedding gift. Gyeongja responded that he had not mentioned it earlier, but explained that the remaining 4 sects had already agreed to support Mukum as their mutual successor. Moon-yoon was stunned by this revelation and repeated the words in disbelief. His thoughts spiraled as he grasped the implication that the remaining 4 sects were backing Mukum as a candidate for the minor priesthood. He recalled Munku's vow of loyalty, yet the jade medallion offered the possibility of curing Moon-yu of the intellectual disability he had been born with. The conflict tore at him as he struggled with the decision, silently calling out to Moon-ku. Meanwhile, Gyeongja reflected inwardly that Yeowun had likely hoped to secure Moon-yoon's loyalty freely. However, with precisely what Moon-yoon desired now in their hands, Gyeongja believed that the outcome of this confrontation had already been decided. Gyeongja pressed Moon-yoon for an answer, asking whether he would grant his blessing for his granddaughter to marry Mukum. Moon-yoon fell silent, struggling to respond. At that moment, Moon-ku, who had been quietly observing the exchange, suddenly rushed to Cheon Yeowun's side. She grabbed his arm and loudly declared that she was already the minor priest's woman. The shocking claim froze the entire gazebo, plunging the surroundings into stunned silence. Hobam and Baekji were left speechless as they stared at Yeowun, their expressions conveying utter disbelief. Even without words, their reactions made their thoughts clear. Yeowun himself was caught completely off guard, realizing that such a statement would inevitably cause massive misunderstanding. Overcome with fear, Moon-ku whispered her apology to Yeowun, explaining that this was the only course of action she could think of. In that instant, Yeowun understood her intent and realized that she had acted solely to help him. Yeowun then glanced toward Mukum, who was watching the scene unfold. Mukum's face had flushed red as he ground his teeth in rage. Seeing Mukum in such a state surprised Yeowun. He responded by pulling Moon-ku closer to himself. Mukum's fury surged as he raged inwardly, convinced that Yeowun was once again taking something that belonged to him. At that moment, Yeowun's lips curled into a faint smile. The sight shattered what little restraint Mukum had left as he lost control of his temper, realizing that Yeowun had laughed at him. Yin Moha burst past Yeowun in a blur of motion. In an instant, a sharp blade flashed up and halted at Mukum's neck, its edge brimming with lethal intent. A strange sound escaped Mukum as the cold pressure closed in on him. Cheon exploded in outrage, demanding to know how a mere guard dared point her sword at someone of Mukum's status, unaware or uncaring of who stood before her. Yin Moha responded calmly, stating that Mukum had been releasing hostile energy toward the minor priest. Cheon's thoughts churned as alarm set in. He recalled warning Mukum not to act recklessly, and realized that Mukum was the only remaining descendant who still had all his limbs intact. The situation had to be stopped immediately, and consumed by rage, Mukum lashed out and attempted to strike Yin Moha's sword aside. The blade did not move an inch, standing firm as though it weighed 1,000 tons. Terror surged through him as disbelief took hold. Despite her being nothing more than a guard, her sword remained utterly unmoved, leaving him shaken as he questioned who she truly was. After Cheon Yeowun's ascension to the minor priesthood, and following the deaths of Jinwon-mu and one of the master martial artists of the 6 Berserk Saber Warriors, the remaining 4 sects had come to see Yeowun as an undeniable threat. It was then that the patriarch had offered them hope, the notion that the minor priest could still change at any moment. Ironically, the sole reason the 4 sects had chosen Mukum as their mutual successor was because he was the only remaining candidate for the minor priesthood whose body was still intact. As the blade pressed closer against his neck, Mukum shouted in panic, hurling insults and threats, unaware of how precarious his position truly was. Gyeongja's blood ran cold as fear gripped him. He knew he had to intervene. Yeowun had once dismembered Jinwon-mu without hesitation, merely for threatening him at the Grand Hall. There was no doubt in his mind that Yeowun could seize this moment as justification to strike Mukum down as well. Both the 3rd and 4th elders dropped to their knees at once, their bodies trembling as they begged for mercy on Mukum's behalf. They They pleaded that his actions were born of foolishness and immaturity, imploring the minor priest to spare him. Yeowun responded with cold indifference, questioning why mercy should be shown, and issued a direct order for Mukum's execution. Yin Moha accepted the command without hesitation and drove her sword forward. Terror erupted instantly. Gyeongja reacted like a bolt of lightning, intercepting the strike and smashing Yin Moha's blade aside with his own. The clash caused the tip of her sword to graze Mukum's neck, tearing the skin slightly as he screamed in pain and leapt backward in panic. Yin Moha moved to pursue him, but Gyeongja stepped in her path and blocked her advance. Rather than retreat, Yin Moha surged forward eagerly, welcoming the confrontation. The two superior master-level warriors collided head-on, their forces crashing together violently. Gyeongja was shaken as the exchange continued. He realized with growing shock that Yin Moha was far from an ordinary guard. Each time their blades met, his arm trembled from the impact. He had believed himself to be stronger, yet reality proved otherwise. With every clash, his disbelief deepened as he questioned how someone with such overwhelming power could be nothing more than a guard. At that moment, Cheon shouted desperately for Gyeongja to stop. Gyeongja turned in alarm, and his blood ran cold at what he saw. Yeowun was already standing beside Mukum. His white saber was raised, its edge aimed directly at Mukum's neck. Yeowun spoke with chilling calm, making it clear that his orders were not being taken seriously. He lifted the saber higher, preparing to sever Mukum's neck. Gyeongja cried out in desperation for him to stop. The blade halted an inch from Mukum's throat. Mukum remained paralyzed with fear, his body shaking uncontrollably as sweat soaked his skin. Gyeongja finally lowered his head in helpless submission and declared that they would comply with any demand, pleading for Yeowun to lower the saber. Yeowun responded by demanding the jade medallion that granted an audience with the divine physician. Frustration surged within Gyeongja as he realized there was no alternative. Preserving Mukum's life took absolute priority. Bowing deeply, he produced the jade medallion and begged for mercy as he handed it over. Yeowun accepted the medallion and calmly repeated the very words Gyeongja had spoken earlier about political maneuvering, about discovering what the other party desired in order to obtain what one wanted. At that instant, Gyeongja's eyes shook violently as he realized those exact words had been overheard. Yeowun then stated coldly that the jade medallion alone was an insufficient bargain. Panic slammed into Gyeongja before he could react. In the next instant, Yeowun's saber flashed. The blade swept past Mukum's right shoulder, and his right arm fell cleanly to the ground. Mukum's scream tore through the air as agony overwhelmed him, his relief at survival instantly replaced by unbearable pain as he realized his arm had been severed. Shock twisted Gyeongja's expression as understanding struck him. Yeowun had acted deliberately after realizing that Mukum was the mutual successor of the Force-X. Yeowun addressed them with icy calm and asked whether there was any objection. Cheon immediately sealed Mukum's blood points to stop the bleeding, suppressing his rage as he answered that there was no objection and offered thanks for the mercy shown. Internally, he forced himself to remain composed, recognizing that once Mukum had displayed hostility toward the minor priest, execution had been fully justified. The fact that Mukum still lived was the only reason they could withdraw alive. The elders announced their departure, citing Mukum's condition as the reasoning. Yet as they turned away, resentment burned fiercely within them and the incident was far from over in their minds. After they departed, Yeowun apologized to Moon-Yun for shedding blood within the demonic Dragon Palm Sect's manor and presented the jade medallion to him as a gift, expressing his hope that it would serve its intended purpose. Moon-Yun reacted with visible shock and gratitude, praising Yeowun's grace and generosity. Yeowun responded modestly, stating that such thanks were unnecessary since Moon-Yun had not yet even met the divine physician. Moon-Yun countered that gratitude was unavoidable when Yeowun had effectively saved their sect. Yeowun smiled gently and asked Moon-Yun to stand. As Moon-Yun reflected inwardly, he was struck by the contrast before him. The minor priest appeared sincere, gentle, and gracious, making it difficult to reconcile this demeanor with the same man who had severed Mukum's arm moments earlier. He acknowledged inwardly that Mun-Ku had judged Yeowun's character better than he had, and marveled at the potential husband she had found. With resolve, Moon-Yun brought his fist to his palm and knelt, formally declaring his vow. As the 8th elder and chief of the demonic Dragon Palm sect, he pledged that his sect would place itself at Yeowun's disposal until his final breath, offering his loyalty without reservation. Yeowun acknowledged that this was precisely what he had intended to request during their meeting. Once everything had been settled, they gathered again in the gazebo to share snacks and tea. Though the tea had grown lukewarm, its flavor remained pleasant. Moon-Yun then casually raised the topic of when Yeowun would marry his granddaughter. The sudden remark caught Yeowun completely off guard, causing him to spray the tea he had been drinking. Hobam was the unfortunate recipient this time, while Mun-Ku flushed red with embarrassment and panic. Hobum excitedly reacted to the idea of Yeowun's marriage, offering congratulations, leaving Yeowun at a loss for how to explain the situation. It took considerable time for Yeowun and Munku to clear up the misunderstanding. After hearing the truth, Munyun could not hide that he wished the situation had been real, though he did not appear disappointed. As he reflected inwardly, Munyun observed their reactions closely and concluded that there was, at the very least, a faint mutual interest between the two. Deciding not to interfere, he resolved to simply sit back and watch how things would unfold. Munyun chose to change the subject and instructed his servants to bring Munyu over. Yeowun asked about Munyun's grandson, and Munyun answered without hesitation. He explained that after receiving such great help today, there was no reason to hide anything. He revealed that he had once had a son named Seong-mun, who had been ambushed and killed by the evil faction during an expedition to Sichuan. The tragedy struck at the worst possible time, as his daughter-in-law had been pregnant. The shock caused complications during childbirth. While Munku was born without issue, her younger twin brother, Munyu, was delayed during delivery, leaving him with an intellectual disability. Munyun recounted how he had searched far and wide for anyone who could help his grandson, but no one had been able to do so. He stated that Yeowun's actions today had finally given him hope and expressed his deep gratitude. The servants soon returned, announcing that they had brought the young lord. Munyu appeared with a half-open mouth, drool trailing as he struggled to speak, softly calling out to his grandfather. At that moment, Baekji and Hobum realized that the skin mask Munku had worn had been crafted in the image of her brother's face. Munku immediately wrapped her arms around Munyu, holding him tightly with warmth and care. Munyun gently stopped her, telling Munyu that it was enough hugging and instructing him to greet the minor priest, reminding him that Yeowun had helped him greatly. Munyu slowly turned toward Yeowun and greeted him with an innocent expression, stumbling through his words as best he could. Watching this scene, Yeowun finally understood why Munyun had been tempted to side with Cheon. At that moment, he asked NANO whether there was any way to treat Munyu's condition. NANO's voice chimed within Yeowun's mind as it began searching its database. It reported that it had identified over 24 million similar cases and requested a more precise analysis, instructing Yeowun to spread both palms and rest them on the patient's head. Yeowun asked Munyun for permission to examine his grandson. After a brief moment of confusion, Munyun agreed. Yeowun thanked him and placed both hands on Munyu's head, following the augmented guidance displayed before his eyes. Munyu tilted his head up with a curious expression, murmuring incoherently as Yeowun held him. NANO then transmitted the scan results through Yeowun's vision, marking several areas with red points to indicate abnormal blood circulation. It explained that this condition stemmed from oxygen flow disruption caused by prolonged childbirth, which had likely damaged brain cells and inhibited certain brain functions. Yeowun immediately asked whether the condition could be treated. NANO responded that treatment was possible by removing coagulated dead cells to restore blood flow, followed by the use of electromagnetic waves to stimulate new cell growth, and asked whether Yeowun wished to attempt the procedure. Yeowun answered without hesitation, stating that if treatment was possible, then it had to be attempted. NANO instructed him to place his fingers on the marked red points. As the indicators flashed over Munyu's head, Yeowun carefully positioned his fingers on the designated spots. Yeowun warned Munyu that the process might cause pain, though Munyu was unable to understand his words. In the next instant, light flared from Yeowun's fingers, and a surge of electrical energy coursed through Munyu's head. Munyu let out a distorted scream as his body began to convulse violently. Blackened blood soon seeped from his eyes, nose, and mouth as his trembling intensified. Munyun sprang to his feet in panic, shouting in alarm and demanding to know what Yeowun was doing to his grandson. Munyu continued screaming as Yeowun showed no sign of stopping. Desperate, Munyun rushed forward to pull Yeowun away, but Yin Moha stepped in and blocked him, ordering him to step back and insisting that he place his trust in the minor priest. Munyun, frantic and convinced that Munyu was about to die, struggled in anguish. At that moment, Yeowun withdrew his fingers. Munyu's body immediately went limp and collapsed to the ground. Munyun shoved Yin Moha aside and rushed to Munyu, lifting him up and gripping his arms as he shook him in desperation. In panic and fury, he turned toward Yeowun, demanding an explanation, only to freeze. Munyu suddenly grasped Munyun's hand. He complained weakly that his head hurt. Munyun froze in disbelief as he looked down at him. Munyu's eyes, which had always wandered separately, were now focused clearly and directly on Munyun, no longer unfocused or misaligned. Overwhelmed, Munyun stared in shock as the reality sank in. Emotion surged through him and he broke down, pulling Munyu into a tight embrace and clutching his grandson as tears streamed down his face. Nearby, Hobum stared at Yeowun in awe, realizing that his lord's power seemed boundless. Baek-ji felt the same shock. He had known that Yeowun possessed deep knowledge of poisons and medicine, having experienced it firsthand, but even he had never imagined it could reach this level. To him, Yeowun now seemed no different from a god. 2 hours later, Yeowun and his group departed from the demonic dragon palm sect's manor. They had entered as 4, but now they left as 5, with Munku's twin brother Mun-yu joining them. In Yeowun's hand was the orange tag that granted an audience with the divine physician. Mun-yun had entrusted it to him, stating that if Yeowun could heal his grandson, then the tag was no longer necessary for him and should be kept and used as Yeowun saw fit. Mun-yun also decided that Mun-yu would stay at the Flying Phantom sect's mansion for the time being, and asked Yeowun to look after his grandchildren. Yeowun and his companions escorted Mun-yu back to the Flying Phantom sect's residence. As they walked, Yeowun glanced back at Mun-ku, and a sudden sense of unease stirred within him. The moment she had grabbed his arm and declared herself to be with him resurfaced vividly in his mind, and his heart thumped heavily in his chest. Yeowun questioned inwardly what this unfamiliar emotion was. He reminded himself that Mun-ku was merely a fiercely loyal follower, yet the doubt lingered, leaving the thought unfinished. Night had already fallen, the sun disappearing early in the late winter sky by the time they arrived at the Flying Phantom sect. Hwan Yi was waiting for them, accompanied by someone unfamiliar. Yeowun paused when he saw her. She was a stubborn-looking, middle-aged woman whose face closely resembled Yin Moha's appearance before her body reconstruction. Hwan Yi welcomed the minor priest, assuming the visit had gone well. He stepped forward respectfully, then smiled when he noticed that Mun-ku was no longer wearing her mask. Through telepathy, he teased her, remarking that his niece had finally removed the mask and praising her beauty, saying it was a waste to hide her face. Mun-ku flushed deeply at the remark and protested in embarrassment through her own telepathic response, telling him to stop making fun of her. Hwan Yi then bowed properly and congratulated Yeowun, stating that the demonic dragon palm sect would now be a tremendous asset to him. Yeowun replied that the success was largely due to Mun-ku's presence by his side and asked how matters had turned out for Hwan Yi. Hwan Yi dropped to one knee and apologized. He explained that he and Elder Sama had gone to the Dream Phantom Sword sect, but were unable to meet the sect chief because other guests had arrived before them. Yeowun immediately questioned whether those guests had come from the Sword sect and the Musician sect. Hwan Yi froze in surprise and asked how Yeowun had known. Yeowun silently understood. Just as he was moving to secure the loyalty of neutral elders, the remaining 4 sects were doing the same, moving in parallel to counter him. Yeowun asked who the unfamiliar woman was. Hwan Yi replied that he had been about to explain and stated that she had arrived not long ago. He then addressed Elder Yin and told her to explain the situation herself. The woman stepped forward, introduced herself as number 24, and bowed respectfully to the minor priest and Elder Yin. Yeowun returned the gesture with a nod, and she immediately began her report. She stated that there had been an intruder inside Yin Moha's mansion. Yin Moha questioned whether the intruder was from the Sword sect again, but the agent denied it and began explaining what had occurred about an hour earlier. As a trained agent who was familiar with Yin Moha's habits, number 24 had been pretending to read a book inside the mansion's office when she suddenly heard a telepathic call addressed directly to Yin Moha. Startled, she exited the office, but no one was present. As she attempted to search the area, another telepathic message instructed her to act normally and not attempt to locate the speaker. She immediately understood the implication. A final message followed, informing her that the situation had changed and that the scheduled date would be moved 10 days earlier. After that, the communication ended. Number 24 explained that this was the last message she received through distant whispering. She had searched for any remaining traces outside but found nothing. Realizing that the matter was beyond her ability to resolve alone, she came to report it directly to Yin Moha. When the report ended, Yeowun turned to Yin Moha with a grave expression. Without speaking, both of them reached the same conclusion regarding the identity of the man behind the message, the Nameless. Yin Moha stated that if the date had been advanced by 10 days, then it meant it was happening that very day, something that had never occurred before. She questioned why it would change now. Yeowun concluded that something of great importance must have occurred and remarked that the timing was ideal, as he had been waiting impatiently for an opportunity to meet him. Later that night, at the Five Wise Peak, within the 10,000 Great Mountains, Yin Moha moved swiftly across the jagged peaks, her figure cutting through the cold night air. Each breath formed visible steam as she advanced. To conceal the fact that she had undergone body reconstruction, she had covered her face with her old skin mask. A voice called out to her, addressing her as Elder Yin. The speaker was Young Bon, the leader of the Sword sect. He remarked that he had hoped the 3 of them would gather as they usually did, but noted that only 2 were present this time. From the way Yin Moha had arrived, he inferred that she had had made progress with her technique. Yin Moha coldly refused to converse with a shameless descendant of a traitorous family. Yongbon laughed, commenting that she had not changed at all. Inwardly, he smirked, convinced that regardless of her attitude, it would ultimately be the sword sect that inherited the wisdom of the sword demon. As the moon rose higher into the sky, the appointed time drew near. The Nameless soon appeared before them, acknowledging their presence and expressing respect for their attendance despite the sudden change in schedule. Yin Moha carefully observed him. Even after reaching the level of Ultimate Genesis Master, she was still unable to gauge his true martial strength. From his demeanor, she sensed that he was already aware of Jinwon-mu's death, which deepened her unease as she questioned who he truly was. The Nameless, concealed beneath black garments and a mask, stated that he would get straight to the point and announced that one of them would. Before he could continue, Yongbon suddenly dropped to his knees. The Nameless questioned his action. Yongbon then formally declared himself, identifying himself as the second elder and chief of the sword sect, and addressed the Nameless with reverence. Acknowledging him as their former patriarch, Yongbon recalled the overwhelming sword formation the Nameless had revealed. The moment it was displayed, both he and Jinwon-mu had been shaken to the core. Having fought alongside Cheon Yeowun through countless battles, they knew the sword art of the Sky Demon all too well. From that alone, Yongbon had reached a single conclusion. Cheon Inji, the Great High Lord, who had vanished nearly 20 years ago, was the only person who could wield such a technique. The Nameless let out a quiet sigh and addressed Yongbon, stating that there appeared to be a misunderstanding. His words cut off abruptly as his gaze snapped toward Yin Moha and Yongbon, his tone sharpening as he demanded to know who it was. Yongbon reacted in confusion, insisting that he did not understand what was being asked. The Nameless's anger surged as he demanded to know who had broken their promise. Without warning, sword chi formed around the Nameless's finger and was hurled backward. Yongbon jolted in shock and turned his head. From the severed grass behind them, a figure stepped into view, the path carved open by the attack. The minor priest revealed himself. Yeowun shifted to evade, but with his position already exposed, there was no place left to hide. Yongbon immediately accused Yin Moha, claiming this intrusion was her doing. Yin Moha denied it outright, stating that she had no idea what he was talking about. Yongbon dropped to both knees before the Nameless and desperately pleaded, declaring that he had upheld the promise and begging to be allowed to succeed the Sword Demon's legacy. His words fell on deaf ears. The Nameless coldly declared that it was already too late and that they no longer had the right to inherit the 24 Demon Sword. Yongbon shouted in desperation, begging him to wait, but the Nameless turned and began to leave. Panicked, Yongbon tried to chase after him, calling out to the Great High Lord, only to have Yin Moha step directly into his path and block him, demanding to know who had given him permission to move. Yongbon's fury exploded. He hurled an insult at Yin Moha and drew his sword, striking down at her without hesitation. Yin Moha responded with a cold smirk, stating that his true colors were finally showing. She raised her true demon sword to meet the attack. The blades collided with a deafening sonic boom, the force of the clash rippling outward and blasting Yongbon backward. Yongbon had believed himself stronger, yet the moment their blades clashed, his hands trembled violently. The shock of realizing that Yin Moha's strength surpassed his own snapped him out of his thoughts just as she surged forward again, closing the distance without mercy. Frustration flared within him as he braced himself. At the same time, Yeowun was already in pursuit of the Nameless, who was descending the peak at terrifying speed. The Nameless had reached halfway down the mountain, his footwork so swift that he seemed to glide with the wind itself. Yeowun assessed the situation and realized he could not close the gap through normal means. If he wanted to keep up, he would have to take a risk. He immediately called upon NANO and activated night vision combined with augmented reality. His vision sharpened instantly, the path and residual traces of the Nameless becoming clear before him. Drawing on the step of the wind god, Yeowun surged forward. The Nameless, fully aware that Yeowun had been following him from the moment he left the peak, sensed the pressure closing in. Deciding not to allow himself to be caught easily, he drew deeper on his internal energy and accelerated further. Then a piercing scream tore through the air above him. The Nameless looked up just as Yeowun dropped from the sky, descending like a falling blade and striking down with the white dragon saber. Reacting instantly, the Nameless drew his sword and blocked the attack. The collision of their blades sent a violent shock through the ground, the sheer weight and force driving the Nameless's foot deep into the earth. He released a surge of internal energy and pushed back, overpowering Yeowun's saber. Yeowun was hurled away away, crashing into a tree with explosive force. The wood shattered under the impact as his body slammed through it. He staggered upright, breathing heavily, his face drained of color. The strain of drawing out so much power at once had taken its toll, and he recognized that continuing like this would be dangerous. As he steadied himself, Nano's voice resonated within his mind, announcing the initiation of self-healing on his damaged muscles and fractured bones. Warmth spread through his body, and the sharp pain rapidly faded as his injuries began to recover. The Nameless pulled his foot free from the ground and stared at Yeowun in disbelief. He questioned whether Yeowun had truly leapt down from above. Yeowun gave no reply, silently confirming the truth. The Nameless reeled inwardly at the realization. Yeowun had jumped from the peak above, predicting his route and plunging straight down after him. Such an act demanded reckless courage beyond reason. As Yeowun steadied himself, Nano completed the rapid healing process. His body recovered quickly, and he rose to his feet, fixing his gaze on the Nameless. Yeowun declared that it was time to uncover who he truly was. The Nameless unsheathed his sword and acknowledged the sheer audacity of risking one's life for that purpose. He warned that such nerve would not grant Yeowun what he sought. With that, he surged forward and unleashed the 24 Demon Sword art. Yeowun was shaken the instant the technique unfolded. This was the true 24 Demon Sword, flawless in structure, vastly superior to Elder Yin's rendition, and overwhelmingly stronger than Yeowun's own execution. Recognizing the disparity, Yeowun understood that he had to fight with everything he possessed. He responded by unleashing the second formation of the Berserk Saber God. Their blades collided violently, and the Nameless was visibly startled as he instantly recognized the technique. The clash sent a brutal shock through Yeowun's body, forcing blood from his mouth. Nano immediately reported severe internal damage caused by penetrating energy and activated rapid regeneration. Even so, the Nameless observed the situation with cold clarity. Yeowun's energy was inferior, and he should have still been suffering from the impact of the earlier fall. Yet the Berserk Saber God's technique surpassed the 24 Demon Sword in nature, ensuring that the battle would not end quickly. Reassessing the situation, the Nameless shifted his footing and attempted to pull away from the exchange. Yeowun sensed the movement instantly and surged forward to prevent him from escaping. Closing the distance, Yeowun unleashed the third codified form of the Berserk Saber God. The Nameless abruptly widened the distance between them and released his grip on the sword. From afar, he extended his hand into the air, and the sword responded, floating freely as it began to move on its own and unleash a sword formation. Yeowun's eyes shook in disbelief as he reacted instinctively and blocked the incoming attacks. He immediately recognized the technique as sword whispering, a method where a warrior controlled a blade purely through internal energy without physically holding it. As he struggled to defend, Yeowun realized the truth behind what he was facing. Although the power was slightly reduced due to imperfect chi circulation, there was no mistaking it. This was the second codified fighting form of the Demonic Lord's sword art. In that instant of realization, the white dragon blade was knocked from Yeowun's hand. The Nameless surged forward, seized the opening, and snapped Yeowun out of his thoughts with a decisive strike to the shoulder. Blood burst from the wound as pain tore through Yeowun's body. He was driven backward 8 full steps before regaining his footing. Clutching his bleeding shoulder, Yeowun lifted his gaze and locked eyes with the Nameless. The existence of such a powerful warrior hidden within the cult shook him, and the question of whether this man truly was the Great High Lord rose sharply in his mind. The Nameless leveled his sword at Yeowun and declared that the difference in their skill had now been made clear. He stated that Yeowun was no match for him and ordered him to stop the pursuit. Yeowun remained silent, utterly indifferent to the warning. Seeing this, the Nameless shook his head. From Yeowun's unwavering gaze, he could tell that the will to fight had not diminished in the slightest. Yeowun's tenacity left him with no illusion that words would be enough. This time, an intense and openly hostile aura erupted from the Nameless and surged toward Yeowun. Yeowun felt the pressure crash down on him and understood the meaning immediately. This was no mere warning. The Nameless was making it clear that the next strike would not end with a wound as light as a pierced shoulder. The Nameless hurled his command forward, and the sword responded as though it were alive, surging through the air toward Yeowun. With unwavering intent, he unleashed the fourth codified form of the Demonic Lord's sword art through sword whispering, guiding the blade's movements with a mere motion of his finger as it carved out the formation. Yeowun drew in a deep breath and launched himself forward at lightning speed. He met the oncoming assault head on, countering the attacks with his saber as sparks and steel screamed through the air. Dozens of shallow cuts tore across his skin, and blood spilled freely as he pushed through the storm of blades. He recognized the overwhelming might of the Demonic Lord's fourth form, and knew that if the exchange continued, the outcome would be dire. The Nameless did not relent. He unleashed the same technique again, sending the sword hurtling toward Yeowun once more. With only half of the formation successfully deflected, Yeowun found himself on the brink of being overwhelmed. At that critical moment, the wrist guard on Yeowun's arm reshaped itself, and the black sword emerged. The Nameless froze in shock as recognition struck him. Yeowun seized the black sword with his left hand while keeping the saber in his right. With his right, he released a form of the Berserk Saber God, and with his left, he unleashed the fourth codified form of the demonic lord's sword art. Drawing both forces together, he roared and stepped forward in a decisive charge. Black and white blades tore through the air, their paths intertwining and taking the shape of a roaring dragon. The Nameless stood rooted in place, unable to comprehend the sheer force bearing down on him. He realized too late that he could not defend against it. His sword formation was crushed instantly, the blade shattering into fragments as the power rebounded violently. The Nameless was hurled backward and slammed into a tree, crashing to the ground as pain from his ravaged internal organs surged through him. He struggled to rise, but Yeowun was already there. The black sword and the saber crossed at his neck, their edges resting coldly against his skin. The Nameless reflected inwardly that Yeowun truly was a monster. He had believed he understood him completely. An early mythical master was only one step above an ultimate Genesis master, yet the gap between those two realms was vast. Even so, Yeowun had wielded both the Berserk Saber God's technique and the demonic lord's sword art. He had even applied Jinwon Mu's secret method, using different techniques with each hand at the same time. The Nameless then fixed his gaze on the black sword and asked whether it was the Sky Demon's sword. Yeowun offered no reply. Instead, he slashed open the mask covering the man's face with the Sky Demon's sword. The mask split apart, revealing the face beneath it. Yeowun frowned deeply, unable to reconcile what he was seeing, and demanded to know who the man truly was. The Nameless stated that he would no longer resist or attempt to flee and asked Yeowun to lower his sword. As he spoke, his voice changed completely. The sound was unmistakable, and Yeowun stiffened in shock as recognition struck him. The man before him was Great Guardian Markham. Yeowun realized inwardly that the Nameless had not been their former patriarch after all, and questioned whether Markham had been altering his voice the entire time. He demanded that Markham explain everything that was happening. Markham answered that before explaining, there was something he needed to tell Yeowun. Before he could continue, a massive explosion thundered through the mountains, shaking the air itself. Both of them looked toward the peak as a surge of dark, ominous energy spread outward from above. Yeowun's expression hardened immediately, recognizing the source as the place where Yin Moha and Yongbon were fighting. Markham urged Yeowun that they should climb back up and stated that he would go with him. Yeowun nodded without hesitation, and the two immediately turned and began ascending the mountain at full speed. At the peak, the landscape had been utterly transformed. Craters scarred the ground, and deep cracks split the stone beneath them. Yin Moha moved rapidly through the devastation, her breath coming out in heavy gasps. Suddenly, something plummeted toward her position and detonated on impact. She leapt back just in time as dust and debris erupted outward. From within the swirling clouds, a massive figure rose. It was Yongbon, his body grotesquely altered by the demonic blood reversal art. Yongbon laughed eerily as he mocked her speed, comparing her movements to those of a fleeing rat and questioning how much longer she believed she could escape him. Yin Moha shot back that he would not emerge unscathed from using blood reversion. Before she could gain distance, Yongbon vanished in a blur and reappeared directly in front of her. Yin Moha barely evaded his strike, dashing away at the last moment. Despite his enlarged form, his speed was terrifying. When she glanced back, he was no longer behind her. He was already in front of her again, looming like a shadow. Bam! His fist slammed into her shoulder with devastating force, sending her flying like a meteor. Her body carved through the ground, dragging a long crater before finally skidding to a stop. She struggled to rise, barely steadying herself with her sword as blood streamed from her shattered shoulder. Yin Moha shouted that he would not get away with using the demonic blood reversal art. Yongbon answered with a twisted grin, declaring that what he had used was not that crude technique, but the divine blood reversal vessel art, far superior and refined beyond comparison. He claimed that his sect had eliminated all of the negative after effects that once plagued the art. Yin Moha's thoughts raced as she analyzed his condition. Normally, users of the demonic blood reversal art suffered from rotting energy and blood, slowly losing control over themselves. Yet Yongbon showed none of those symptoms. If the sword sect had truly removed those flaws, they would be the most dangerous force within the cult. But the fact that they had kept this art hidden told her the truth. If such perfection truly existed, there would have been no reason for secrecy. The technique techniques still possessed fatal weaknesses, they were simply being concealed. Yeongbon declared that it was enough and charged straight at Yin Moha with the intent to finish her. Yin Moha refused to accept it. Blue Force Chi surged along her sword as she unleashed her counterattack, thrusting the blade directly into Yeongbon's chest. The moment it struck, her sword shattered apart. Shock flashed through her as disbelief overtook her. Yeongbon mocked her, claiming the attack barely tickled him, and stepped forward unharmed. Death loomed over Yin Moha as her strength failed. A faint sound escaped her lips as her body gave way. Yeongbon slowly raised his massive hand, his grin widening as he promised her a painful end. His fist descended toward her head, and Yin Moha closed her eyes, bracing for death. Instead, the sound of metal colliding rang out beside her, accompanied by heavy breathing. When she opened her eyes, she saw a clear white blade blocking Yeongbon's fist. It was Yeowun, standing before her, his body drenched in sweat. Yeowun stated calmly that he had arrived just in time. Yeongbon erupted in rage, demanding how Yeowun dared to interfere yet again. Yeowun met him with cold eyes and shoved him back, dismissing the accusation as foolish. Yeongbon snarled in fury, declaring Yeowun as arrogant as ever and questioning whether he truly believed he could handle him. Evil energy surged violently from Yeongbon's body. His hand became engulfed in terrifying force chi as he brought it crashing down toward Yeowun. Yeowun reacted instantly, spinning as blade force chi gathered along the white dragon blade. Force chi collided violently, filling the area with a deafening clash. Yeowun had invoked the formation of the butterfly blade dance, yet even so, the overwhelming power blasted him backward. Yeowun felt a surge of alarm within him. The presence before him no longer felt human, but closer to a wild beast driven by pure violence. He realized that this overwhelming pressure was the result of the demonic blood reversal art. Yeongbon growled with twisted delight and declared that he would end Yeowun there and then. In a blur of motion, he charged forward at terrifying speed and unleashed the second codified fighting form of the evolved demon sword. His laughter rang out as he proclaimed that escape was impossible. Yeowun attempted to evade using his stepping technique, but the sheer scale of the force chi engulfing the area left him no room to flee. With dodging no longer an option, he steeled himself to confront it head on. Recognizing the overwhelming power bearing down on him, he adjusted his grip and unleashed the blade skill of the Berserk Saber God. The white dragon blade struck Yeongbon's body, yet not a single cut appeared. Yeowun felt his strength falter as the reality set in. He could not break through in his current condition. His face drained of color. In the next instant, the arm holding his blade was violently knocked aside. Yeongbon declared that such attacks were useless, and that Yeowun could not harm him. Yeowun barely had time to react as another crushing wave of force chi slammed toward him. He blocked instinctively, but the impact hurled him away. His body bounced across the ground multiple times before crashing down with explosive force, carving a crater into the earth. A thick cloud of dust erupted, swallowing his figure from sight. Markim, who had just reached the peak, froze in shock as he took in the scene. He realized with dread that the second elder was indeed using the demonic blood reversal art. With Yeowun having already expended a significant amount of internal energy during his earlier battle, the situation had turned dangerously grim. Yeongbon laughed wildly, proclaiming that Yeowun was nothing before him. His triumph halted abruptly when a strange sound rose from within the dust cloud. The laughter died as he turned toward it, his beast-like senses catching an ominous presence. In the next instant, Cheon Yeowun burst from the dust. A black sword was clenched in his hand. He demanded that Yeongbon try to block this as well. Yeongbon roared in fury, shocked that Yeowun still lived, and surged forward. Massive force chi engulfed both of his hands as he charged. In response, black force chi poured from Yeowun's sword, swelling into a demonic aura that wrapped around him like living shadow. The black sword traced a movement that split into 24 paths before collapsing into a single line. Yeongbon gathered all his power and met it head on. The force chi meant to tear Yeowun apart was instantly overturned. Panic struck as he realized he had to defend. The black streak pierced straight through Yeongbon's chest before any defense could form. Yeongbon screamed as Yeowun's body shot past him and halted 10 steps away. Staggering, Yeongbon dropped to his knees and stared at the gaping hole in his chest. The body that even force chi could not cut had been cleanly penetrated. Confusion filled his final moments as his strength failed and he collapsed, motionless. Yeowun stood there, breathing hard as he looked at Yeongbon's corpse. His chest heaved with each breath. The battle had drained him to the point where he could no longer fight. Great Guardian Markham rose and approached Yeowun before suddenly dropping to both knees. He pressed his head to the ground and declared that Great Guardian Markham of the Great Demonic Cult had come to serve the new demonic lord. Yeowun reacted in confusion, questioning what Markham was saying. Yinmoha was equally shocked as she realized that the man before them was the head of the royal bodyguards. Markham reaffirmed his words, stating that he was offering his respect to the new demonic lord. Understanding dawned on Yinmoha as she realized that it had been Markham who had secretly gathered them all along. She demanded an explanation, still unable to grasp the meaning behind it all. As she spoke, her gaze shifted to the black sword in Yeowun's hand. Under the moonlight, the blade gleamed darkly, revealing the engraved words, Sky Demon Sword. The realization struck her like lightning. In shock, Yinmoha immediately dropped to her knees and bowed deeply. She formally declared herself Yinmoha, the 10th elder of the demonic warrior cult, and pledged herself before the new demonic lord. Yeowun remained bewildered, demanding to know why they were both doing this. Yinmoha answered without hesitation, stating that it was because Yeowun was the true new demonic lord. Yeowun questioned the meaning behind being called the true demonic lord. Yinmoha explained that on the northern side of the city stood a shrine that preserved the ancestral tablets of all previous patriarchs. Within that shrine was an altar that housed the ancestral tablet and written will of the founding demonic lord. Engraved there was an epitaph left behind before his ascension to the heavens, declaring that the one who wielded the true demon sword would inherit the title of demonic lord. Those words were absolute, and not even the current patriarch could defy them. She stated that throughout the entire history of the cult, none of the patriarchs had ever inherited the title of demonic lord. The demon sword possessed by the patriarch was merely an imitation, a fact all the elders were fully aware of. Yeowun found this strange. He reasoned that if only the patriarch had known the sword was fake, he could have deceived everyone and defied the founding demonic lord's will. He questioned why all the elders had remained silent despite knowing such crucial information. Yinmoha admitted that she had wondered the same thing. She explained that the elders' silence stemmed from an ancient tale passed down by their ancestors. According to this tale, during the incident involving the Berserk Saber God 500 years ago, the true demon sword had been stolen. If that rumor was true, it would be a profound humiliation for the cult, which was why both the patriarch and the elders had concealed the truth. Yeowun reflected inwardly that the sword must have been an imitation from the very beginning, considering that the real one had been hidden within the sealed demonic chamber. Markham then spoke, stating that while Yinmoha's explanation was mostly correct, there were important details that needed clarification. He revealed that the patriarch never mentioned the demon sword because of the protectors of the demonic order. For generations, these protectors had watched over the patriarchs to ensure that the founding demonic lord's orders were obeyed. They had also inherited martial arts passed directly down from the demonic lord himself, placing them far beyond the patriarch's reach. Because they always operated from the shadows, their existence was unknown to the world. Markham reached into his robes and produced a medallion. The front bore the insignia of the Great Guardian, but on the reverse side was an engraving that read Demonic Order. Markham revealed that he was the current protector of the demonic order, a secret title passed down through all head royal bodyguards before him. The medallion itself had been created by the founding demonic lord. Yeowun questioned whether holding such a title would not make him a threat in the eyes of the patriarch, even if the position had been established by the founder. Markham explained that the founding demonic lord had imposed a strict restriction upon all protectors. Each protector carried a forbidden poisonous parasite within their body. This parasite was linked to a dominator insect, which could be driven into a frenzy through the injection of internal energy, causing the parasite inside the protector to rupture and release its poison, killing the host instantly. Markham stated that these parasites were embedded within his heart and lower abdomen. Only those of the cult knew how to create the dominator insect from the poisonous parasite. When a new patriarch ascended, the protectors would present the dominator insect as a vow of loyalty, granting the patriarch the means to kill them instantly should they ever pose a threat. Yeowun realized inwardly that he had never known such a secret existed. The patriarch and the head royal bodyguard were constantly watching one another, yet neither could overstep their boundaries because of the demonic order and the deadly parasite binding them. Markham continued, explaining that the founding demonic lord had sealed a demon within the cult, and prophesied that one day a worthy individual would obtain the demon sword. The protectors had waited for centuries, but no one had ever succeeded in finding the true demon sword, nor had anyone mastered the demonic lord's sword art. As protectors of the demonic order, they acknowledged only the true demonic lords of each era as their rightful rulers. With that, Markham formally asked Yeowun to bestow his divine demonic energy energy upon him, acknowledging Yeowun as the demonic lord of the present age. Yeowun questioned whether Markham was referring to the ominous demonic energy he possessed. As he poured that energy into the demonic sword, black force chi surged violently upward from the blade. Markham stared in awe, his certainty turning into conviction the moment he witnessed it. He stated that the Dominator insect had only ever been a temporary restraint imposed because no true successor had ever appeared bearing divine demonic energy. The only being capable of truly controlling the poisonous parasite was the demonic lord himself. He asked Yeowun to bless him with that divine demonic energy and free him from the Dominator insect. Yeowun lowered his gaze, then placed his sword above Markim's head and released the demonic energy directly into him. The energy entered through Markim's head and spread throughout his body. A sharp, crushing pain struck his heart and internal energy as the demonic energy came into contact with the poisonous parasite, forcing a strained groan from him. The pain faded quickly. Moments later, the energy fully settled within him, and his eyes glowed with a deep, ominous darkness. Markham formally declared himself protector of the demonic order and head royal bodyguard, and vowed his absolute loyalty to the new demonic lord. Yeowun felt genuine astonishment at this turn of events, realizing inwardly that Markham's vow meant the allegiance of the entire royal bodyguard house. Yin Moha expressed relief at witnessing Markim's pledge, but stated that he still owed them an explanation. Markim agreed and began recounting the truth. 25 years earlier, the previous patriarch had abruptly abandoned his position and entered isolation training. After 5 years, he emerged incomparably stronger than before. Markham revealed that he had met the previous patriarch privately on the night before his disappearance. Yin Moha reacted in shock, demanding to know why this had never been disclosed. Markim answered that he had been explicitly ordered to remain silent and that the patriarch had never told him where he was going. 20 years earlier, inside Markim's private quarters, Cheon Yeowun spoke to him in a grave tone and ordered him not to reveal what he was about to hear to anyone, not even the current patriarch. Markham immediately affirmed his absolute loyalty. Cheon Yeowun then asked whether Markham was aware of the evolved demon sword and the 24 demon sword techniques hidden within the underground vault of the manual library. Markham acknowledged that he was. Cheon Yeowun stated that he would soon be departing for an unknown destination. He instructed Markham that if he failed to return within 10 years, Markham was not to allow the sword demon's will to restrain him from taking action. He ordered Markham to pass on the sword demon's techniques to those connected to the demon sword sect. With that, Cheon Yeowun handed him a piece of paper. Markham questioned what the paper was, but Cheon Yeowun merely told him that he would understand once he looked at it. As Markham examined the contents, he was left utterly stunned. Cheon Yeowun explained that during his 5 years of isolation training, he had conducted extensive research. Though incomplete, the notes contained enough detail to perform the codified fighting forms. Cheon Yeowun then entrusted Markham with completing the research and perfecting the demonic lord's sword art during his absence. Markham protested, stating that if Cheon Yeowun himself had been unable to complete it, there was no way he could ever hope to do so. Cheon Yeowun acknowledged the difficulty, but nevertheless placed the responsibility squarely on Markham's shoulders. After delivering those final words, Cheon Yeowun departed. Returning to the present, Markham explained that for 8 long years, he had attempted to recreate the demonic lord's sword art. However, he was never able to decipher the correct energy circulation methods. The most he could accomplish was mastering sword whispering in conjunction with the technique. When 10 years passed and the previous patriarch never returned, events unfolded as they were now known. Events that Elder Yin was already fully aware of. Yeowun admitted that he could not understand why the previous patriarch had never passed down the demonic lord's sword art directly to the current patriarch. Markham replied that he had wondered the same thing, but revealed that the previous patriarch had held deep disdain for the man who now occupied the position. Yeowun reacted with surprise, but Yin Moha confirmed that she had heard similar accounts. At the time, rumors had spread throughout the cult that the previous patriarch intended to appoint Yue Chun, a descendant of the stealth sect, as the next minor priest. However, the current patriarch, a descendant of the sword sect, had slaughtered all other candidates after graduating from the academy. He had even severed the right arm of his own brother Yu Jung Chun, earning a fearsome reputation for being ruthless and cold. Despite this, the previous patriarch had abruptly handed the position to Yu Jung Chun, the current patriarch, an act that caused massive upheaval within the cult. Markham then added that the previous patriarch had left him with one final warning. When Yeowun asked what it was, Markham explained that he had been warned that if the previous patriarch failed to return within 10 years, the cult would fall into grave danger. danger. Yeowun immediately connected the dots and questioned whether this meant the previous patriarch had already been aware of the 6 Berserk Saber Warriors. Markim answered that it appeared so, stating that after witnessing their overwhelming martial prowess firsthand, he had become convinced of it. Yeowun reflected inwardly that the 6 Berserk Saber Warriors might be directly connected to the previous patriarch's disappearance. Yinmoha then questioned Markim about his decision to move their reunion date forward. Markim's expression hardened as he turned to Yeowun, preparing to explain. At that very moment, inside the Lord's palace, the hour was late enough that all lights should have been extinguished, yet the patriarch's office remained brightly illuminated. Cheon Yeowun sat listening to a report delivered by a middle-aged man whose left eye was covered in black. It was Hyun Pa, the captain of the patriarch's direct bodyguards. He reported that they had lost track of the Great Guardian after he exited through the western gate. Despite ongoing searches, the palace guards were insufficient in number to thoroughly comb the area. Cheon Yeowun asked about the whereabouts of the other two. Hyun Pa reported that surveillance from the Flying Phantom sect confirmed the minor priest had not yet returned, and the same was true for Elder Yin Moha of the demonic reaching sword sect. A quiet realization settled over the room. Another middle-aged man, standing against the wall in the corner of the office, finally spoke. His right arm was missing, and as he stepped forward toward the patriarch's desk, he remarked that matters had once again reached this point. He reminded Yeowun that the individual in question was no longer a usable card, and questioned whether the patriarch's own creed had not always been to treat people as nothing more than tools. Yeowun questioned what he meant. The one-armed man stated that the threat should be eliminated before it spiraled out of control. Yeowun's brow rose, irritation clear on his face, as the man asserted with certainty that Youngbon would not return alive. Anyone who had witnessed Youngbon's past actions should already understand this outcome. Silence followed. The man continued, reasoning that allowing such a figure to remain tied to the 6 clans would only weaken the cult. He described Youngbon as a poison, no longer useful as a pawn, and claimed that excising the rot was the only way for the rest to recover. Yeowun fell into deep contemplation before finally reaching a decision. He declared that the time had come. The one-armed man acknowledged the decision as wise and asked how the patriarch intended to proceed. Yeowun stated that he would begin by removing the target's arms and legs. Turning to his subordinate, Yeowun addressed Hyun Pa and issued a direct patriarchal command. He ordered the immediate arrest of Left Guardian Lee Ha-meng and Right Guardian Sub-meng, demanding that both be imprisoned at once. Hyun Pa accepted the order without hesitation and departed to carry it out. Before the sun rose the next morning, Yeowun and his followers buried Youngbon's body. He had perished as a result of using the divine blood reversal vessel art, and they made certain to lay him to rest far away from Ohyun Peak so that no one would ever discover it. Through chi adjustment, Yeowun was able to restore his internal energy quickly. Markim and Yin Moha, however, had both sustained internal injuries, forcing Yeowun to remain on guard while they recovered. In the end, Yeowun returned to the cult grounds around 10 in the morning. As he entered, Yeowun immediately sensed that something was off. The guards were noticeably more tense than they had been the day before. When Yeowun presented his medallion, the guards reacted with visible surprise. Instead of merely stepping aside, they bowed deeply. Then they exchanged glances with one another and gave subtle nods. Yeowun immediately instructed NANO to transcribe their telepathic communication. NANO complied. The message was clear. Yeowun had returned, and the patriarch's quarters were to be informed at once. Hearing this, Yeowun understood inwardly that while he had already known the patriarch and his men were watching his every move, this marked the beginning of the danger Markim had warned him about. At the same time, within the Lord's palace, Markim was being escorted by palace guards. As they reached, Hyunpa formally announced that the head royal bodyguard had been brought before the patriarch. Cheon Yeowun ordered him to be brought in. As Markim entered, he immediately dropped to his knees. Cheon Yeowun coldly asked how Markim's little escapade the previous night had gone. Markim apologized for causing concern. Cheon Yeowun cut straight to the point, stating that the second elder, Youngbon, had left the city the night before and that his whereabouts were still unknown. Markim reacted inwardly, realizing the implication. Cheon Yeowun continued, stating that he was not finished speaking. He revealed that not only was Youngbon missing, but reports had also confirmed that the minor priest and elder Yin had disappeared as well. Markim cursed inwardly, realizing that the patriarch had not only been tracking him through the bodyguards, but had been keeping watch over the others too. Cheon Yeowun stated that, based on the minor priest's past actions, he could not help but conclude that something terrible had happened to the second elder. He reasoned that if the minor priest had lured the second elder out of the city and killed him, then such an act would amount to crossing the line over a petty personal grievance. Markim immediately understood the intent behind those words. This was the justification Yeowun had been preparing all along, a way to tighten his grip and act even more ruthlessly against the new demonic lord. Markim firmly denied the accusation, insisting that the matter had nothing to do do with the minor priest's personal emotions. When Yoo-jung pressed him further, demanding to know what else it could possibly be about, Markim had no choice. To protect the minor priest, he recounted the events of the previous night. He explained that due to the demonic blood reversal art, the second elder's body had grown so massive that Markim had been unable to move it on his own. He stated that his intention had been to report everything the moment he returned and arrange for the body to be transported back into the city. Yoo-jung accepted the explanation outwardly and stated that he would assign several bodyguards to accompany Markim. He ordered him to bring back the second elder's body. Markim acknowledged the command and withdrew. Once Markim had left, the one-armed man approached the patriarch and remarked that this confirmed it. Markim was also siding with him. Yoo-jung agreed, noting that Markim would no longer act according to their plans. When the man asserted that Markim would still have to comply, Yoo-jung said nothing. Instead, he produced a key and unlocked the safe beneath his desk. Inside rested a small wooden box that radiated warmth. When Yoo-jung opened it, blood coated the interior, and a small writhing insect squirmed within. The man recoiled in disgust as Yoo-jung explained that it was a dominating insect. He revealed that he had received it 25 years earlier, when Markim had sworn loyalty to him. Rather than consuming it immediately, he had ordered the head physician to analyze it and had only recently received the results. Without hesitation, Yoo-jung picked up the insect and swallowed it whole. The one-armed man grimaced as Yoo-jung's eye glowed faintly red. With the dominating insect now within him, Yoo-jung knew that Markim no longer had any choice but to obey his orders. Meanwhile, at the guest house of the Flying Phantom sect, Hwan Yi reported everything that had taken place during Yeowun's absence. He explained that Left Guardian Lee Ha-meng and Right Guardian Sub-meng had both been arrested. Baek-ji had been assigned the position of Vice Warden of the Northern Light Brigade, a subsidiary force under the Stealth sect, while Wang Hol had been appointed Vice Warden of the Demonic Energy Guard Brigade belonging to the Sword sect. Yeowun observed that this meant they had all been redistributed under the other four sects. Hwan Yi confirmed this and added that they had been taken to the Patriarch's quarters early that morning. Hobum loudly complained that the official reasoning behind these assignments was that anyone ranked above Warden class had to be given a post. He then shouted in relief that he had somehow managed to avoid being drafted. Hwan Yi inwardly noted that this was likely because the Patriarch had deemed Hobum useless in any official capacity. Hwan Yi then continued, stating that the reshuffling did not stop with the royal bodyguards and wardens. Elder Sama had been sent away on an inspection mission to Hunan, while Elder Mun had received direct orders to establish a defensive line in the northeastern region of Jiangxi in preparation for a possible war against the Six Berserk Saber warriors. Yinmoha commented that she would likely receive an order soon as well. Hwan Yi agreed, explaining that the Patriarch's warriors had already searched for her multiple times. However, since she had removed her mask, they would still assume she had not yet returned. Hobum burst out in outrage, questioning how the Patriarch could do this, pointing out that these moves effectively isolated Yeowun by stripping him of all his forces. He added that at least he and Elder Hwan were exempt from this situation. Hwan Yi responded calmly that they were exempt for entirely different reasons, but acknowledged the point nonetheless. Hwan Yi glanced at Yeowun, a heavy unease settling in his thoughts as he feared this might be the Patriarch's attempt to move directly against the minor priest. At that moment, Yeowun and the two elders reacted simultaneously as an enormous surge of internal energy pressed toward them from all directions. The pressure was unmistakable. Hobum sensed the change and grew visibly flustered, unable to understand what was happening. Hwan Yi immediately realized the meaning behind the presence and grimly acknowledged that it was already too late to take any preventive action. Outside, hundreds of warriors had completely surrounded the Flying Phantom sect's mansion. A guard stationed at the gate rushed inside in a panic and urgently reported the situation. Hwan Yi demanded to know what was happening, and the guard informed him that a man had appeared at the front of the manor claiming to be the warden of the Cursed Sword Brigade, acting as a messenger sent directly by the Patriarch. The moment Hwan Yi heard the name, his expression stiffened in shock. Yeowun noticed the reaction and focused on the significance of the Cursed Sword Brigade. Hwan Yi explained that the Cursed Sword Brigade was one of the two Shadow Sword Brigades operating under the Sword Sect. This brigade controlled the Cursed Sword Sect itself. Alongside it had once been the Million Sword Sect, the two together forming the hidden forces of the Sword Sect. However, 3 years earlier, the Million Sword Sect had been exposed for using prisoners as subjects for the demonic blood reversal art during the Academy examinations. That discovery had resulted in the complete dissolution of the sect. Since then, the Cursed Sword Sect had remained the sole surviving force of that Shadow Shadow Division, Hwan Yi realized with dread that their sudden mobilization could only signal serious trouble, and the fact that they had acted so quickly made the situation even more ominous. Yeowun let out a quiet sigh and stepped into the yard, lifting his gaze toward the sky. He had prepared himself for this moment, yet it had come far sooner than expected. He had never imagined that his path would lead him to stand against his own father, rather than directly confronting the 6 clans. All that remained in his heart was bitterness toward the man who had abandoned Lady Hua and left her to die. The thought lingered heavy and unresolved, as if questioning whether this too was fate. Yeowun fell into silence, lost in thought. Those around him sensed it and waited without a word. At last, Yeowun exhaled slowly, lowered his gaze, and turned to Hwan Yi with a firm, resolved expression. He asked about the favor he had requested earlier and whether all preparations had been completed. Hwan Yi answered immediately and confidently, his eyes gleaming as he confirmed that everything was ready. Outside the gate, rows of warriors stood in disciplined formation. They were led by Hyunpa and Jukum, the warden of the Cursed Sword Brigade. Jukum remarked that he felt the group inside would emerge soon. Hyunpa observed inwardly that they had taken longer than expected, but there were no signs of them gathering forces to resist. Moments later, the gates opened. 4 figures stepped out: Cheon Yeowun, Hobum, Yin Moha, and Hwan Yi. Yin Moha, no longer wearing her mask, positioned herself as though she were merely Yeowun's personal guard. Jukem and Hyunpa both bowed respectfully upon seeing Yeowun, offering their greetings to the minor priest. Yeowun returned the gesture with restrained courtesy. Hwan Yi expressed his surprise at seeing such a large force surrounding the Flying Phantom Sect's manor and questioned the reason for it. Jukem apologized if their presence had caused discomfort and clarified that the Cursed Sword Brigade had no intention of harming the Flying Phantom Sect. Hyunpa then stated that he had brought a direct order from the Patriarch. Yeowun immediately went down on one knee and formally declared that he, Cheon Yeowun, minor priest, humbly accepted the Patriarch's command. Hyunpa unrolled the scroll and read aloud the patriarchal order. An urgent message had arrived from Jejiang, reporting that the forces of the 6 Berserk Saber warriors were moving south toward Fujian. This army was to be placed under the command of the minor priest. Yeowun was ordered to take charge of them and join forces with the northern Fujian troops to intercept and stop the 6 Berserk Saber warriors. Yeowun's eyes trembled at the unexpected command. He had anticipated a move against him, but not this. Hyunpa pressed that the situation was urgent and reminded Yeowun that this was a direct patriarchal order. As such, Yeowun was to lead the Cursed Sword Brigade immediately and depart without delay. Yeowun understood inwardly that the Patriarch intended to deal with him beyond the cult's territory. Hobum ground his teeth in fury, sensing that Yeowun was being pushed straight into a deadly precipice. Unable to hold back, he shouted that he would join as well. Hyunpa instantly rebuked him, declaring that speaking out during the execution of a patriarchal order was unacceptable, and emphasizing that the Patriarch had commanded the minor priest to go alone. Yin Moha grasped the true intent behind the order. The Patriarch was forcing the minor priest to walk directly into a trap. She understood his fear of losing authority, yet the thought that he would coldly move to eliminate his own child filled her with shock and anger. Hyunpa's lips curled into a faint smirk as he declared that it was time to depart. 5 hours later, Markim returned to the cult. He had successfully retrieved Youngbon's body from the distant peak where it had been buried and brought it back. The corpse was enormous and heavy, requiring 6 men to carry it. However, the moment Markim entered the palace grounds, he sensed something amiss. The atmosphere among the warriors and servants felt unnaturally tense. Markim ordered that the body be taken to the preservation room so it could be cleaned and presented to the Lord. Though it had been buried, the body was not particularly dirty, yet something about the situation felt wrong. Markim gave a silent nod, allowing the palace guards to proceed. As the guards began moving the body, Markim noticed the direction they were heading and felt a sudden jolt of alarm. He demanded to know why they were moving toward the incinerator. Before he could press further, Hyunpa stepped in and blocked him. Hyunpa stated that these were direct orders from the Patriarch and warned Markim not to pry any further. He added that Markim's attention was misplaced, as the Patriarch had commanded that Markim be escorted to the Grand Hall immediately upon his return. Markim stiffened when he heard that the Grand Hall was open. That hall was never convened without a formal assembly, and the realization struck him immediately. Yunpa calmly informed him that the meeting had already begun nearly 15 minutes earlier and urged him to hurry. When Markim asked what the meeting concerned, Yunpa answered with a dark smile, revealing that it was about the dethronement of the minor priest. Shock rippled through Markim. He had expected the Lord to act eventually, but he had never imagined it would happen with such speed. Unaware that Cheon Yeowun had already been forced out of the castle under orders, Markham suppressed his alarm and stated that he would head there at once. As Markham departed, Hunpa scoffed inwardly. He was certain that Markham stood firmly on the minor priest's side, yet it no longer mattered. The minor priest would not even be present at the meeting. Inside the grand hall, the atmosphere was heavy and oppressive. Clan leaders and elders from across the castle had already gathered. Most of the major clan heads were present, but many elder seats remained conspicuously empty. Markham narrowed his eyes at the unnatural silence filling the hall. For a meeting of this scale, the lack of discussion was unsettling. His gaze swept the hall in search of Cheon Yeowun, but the minor priest was nowhere to be found. Among those aligned with Yeowun, only Hwan Yi was present. Confusion tightened Markim's expression as the Lord's voice rang out, summoning him to step forward. Markim complied and moved to the center of the hall, standing between the rows of elders' seats. Cheon Yeowun then addressed him directly, instructing Markim to repeat word for word exactly what he had reported moments earlier. Markim bowed his head and acknowledged the Lord. Cheon Yeowun immediately questioned him, asking whether it was true that the minor priest, Cheon Yeowun, had ambushed and murdered the second elder. The word ambush struck Markham sharply, and his eyes trembled. He had already reported that Yeongbon had used the demonic blood reversal art and had died as a result. The accusation did not align with what he had told the Lord. As Markham began to speak, a telepathic message pierced his mind. Cheon Yeowun coldly ordered him to give the answer he wished to hear, warning that refusal would trigger the poisonous insect inside Markim's body and cause it to explode. The Lord repeated the question aloud, demanding confirmation that the minor priest had ambushed the second elder. Markim clenched his lips tightly. The pressure was unmistakable, and the threat was real. Markham finally spoke, stating that the minor priest had not ambushed the second elder. Cheon Yeowun's eyes flared with fury at the unexpected response. Markham had directly disobeyed his command. As the Lord prepared to press further, Markham realized he had no room left to retreat. He had to stop the situation from being twisted further, especially before the truth about the blood reversal art could be buried. Markham continued, declaring that the minor priest had not killed Yeongbon in cold blood. Inside, Cheon Yeowun was shaken. The poison should have activated the moment Markim defied him, yet nothing was happening. Markim showed no sign of pain or reaction and continued to stand firm before the assembly. Markham began to reveal the reason, stating that the second elder had used the demonic blood reversal art. The moment those words were about to fully escape his mouth, the Lord reacted. He sensed that if the truth was spoken, his carefully constructed scheme would collapse in front of every clan leader present. Frustration surged through him, and he lunged forward to silence Markim by force. Before the attack could reach him, someone stepped in and blocked it. It was the 11th elder, Hwan Yi. Seizing the opening, Markham raised his voice so that no one in the Grand Hall could miss it. He declared that the minor priest had only put down the second elder because he had used the forbidden demonic blood reversal art. Cheon Yeowun ground his teeth in fury and accused Hwan Yi of defying him. The man standing in front of him calmly corrected that assumption. He stated that he was not Elder Hwan. Shock rippled through the hall as the man smiled and peeled the skin from his chin. The face beneath was revealed, and it was not Hwan Yi at all. It was Cheon Yeowun, wearing Hwan Yi's skin mask. Cheon Yeowun's expression darkened as disbelief overtook him. He demanded to know why the minor priest was standing there. Yeowun answered with a cold smirk, stating that he had come to succeed Cheon Yeowun's reign as patriarch. About 10 miles east of the demonic cult's castle, 300 warriors of the Cursed Sword Brigade advanced on horseback through the darkening land. They had departed late, and night was already creeping in, forcing them to search for a place to camp. Dense bushes covered the hill they occupied, but a wide open field lay not far ahead, an ideal location to settle down for the night. Jukum received a telepathic report from his lieutenant confirming the spot was suitable. After surveying the sky and surroundings, he silently approved. Moments later, Jukum urged his horse forward until he rode alongside the figure leading the group, Cheon Yeowun. Without warning, Jukum drew his sword. Yeowun turned his head slightly, sensing the sudden hostility. Jukum's killing intent surged as he revealed his true aim. At the same instant, his lieutenant spurred his horse forward, force chi coating his blade as he swung down with lethal intent, aiming straight for Yeowun's head. Yeowun showed no surprise. He calmly leaned his upper body backward, narrowly evading the descending strike. In one smooth motion, he drew his own sword and slashed once. The lieutenant's neck was severed cleanly, and the body collapsed as the head struck the ground. Yeowun walked past the falling corpse without a second glance. Jukum watched with narrowed eyes, realizing that the minor priest had been expecting this betrayal all along. Then Yeowun reached up to his face and peeled away the skin mask he was wearing. The face revealed beneath was not Cheon Yeowun's, but Hwan Yi's. A faint chuckle escaped him as he clarified the deception, pressing his fingers beneath his chin again, as he had been wearing two masks layered together, narrowly avoiding removing both at once. Jukum ground his teeth in frustration as realization struck him. He understood that Elder Hwan had been impersonating the minor priest from the very beginning of the expedition. Hwan Yi confirmed it without hesitation, his expression relaxed and confident. Jukum's fury erupted. He accused Elder Hwan of openly defying a patriarchal order, his voice sharp with outrage. Hwan Yi responded calmly, stating that the order only demanded the minor priest's participation in the expedition and never commanded his death. There was no violation in what had been done. Enraged, Jukum issued an immediate command for Hwan Yi's arrest and ordered the brigade to turn back toward the cult. The warriors responded at once, acknowledging his authority. Hwan Yi, however, showed no sign of panic. He assessed the situation with clear eyes, acknowledging the numerical disadvantage but expressing confidence in his own speed and ability to evade capture. He questioned whether they truly believed they could restrain him. Jukum answered with a grim smile, revealing that they had anticipated facing a Genesis Master at minimum and had prepared accordingly. In response, the warriors of the Cursed Sword Brigade began to release low, beast-like growls. Their internal energy surged violently and their eyes turned bloodshot red as an ominous presence spread across the field. Hwan Yi frowned, realizing too late what had been prepared against him. At the same moment, inside the Great Hall, shock rippled through the gathered clan leaders. Cheon Yeowun stood before them, fully exposed. They had all been informed that he had already been dispatched to South Fujian to confront the Six Berserk Saber Warriors, so his sudden appearance was completely unexpected. It became clear that he had infiltrated the Grand Hall by disguising himself as Hwan Yi. With Nano's assistance, Yeowun adjusted his voice back to its original tone. The deception was complete. Cheon Yeowun glared at him, instantly recognizing that Yeowun had employed an advanced and unfamiliar form of deceptive technique. Cheon Yeowun's fury exploded as he shouted, refusing to tolerate what he called outright insolence. He accused Yeowun of defying patriarchal orders and deceiving him, declaring it an unforgivable act of treason against the demonic cult. Yeowun responded without hesitation. He questioned the patriarch directly, demanding to know why Yeowun was attempting to dethrone him by falsely accusing him of ambushing and murdering the second elder. Yeowun's lips curled into a cold smirk. Rather than answer, he turned his attention to the Great Guardian and ordered Markim to arrest the minor priest at once. Markim lowered his head, his voice steady as he refused to carry out the command. The refusal did not surprise the patriarch. Yeowun had already anticipated that Markim had chosen Yeowun's side. Raising his voice, he addressed all the elders and clan leaders gathered in the Grand Hall, pointing out that the Great Guardian was now obeying the Crown Prince instead of his rightful patriarch. He questioned how anyone could place trust in Markim's testimony under such circumstances. The Grand Hall fell into a heavy silence, exactly as Yeowun had intended. Yeowun continued, stating that he understood Markim's priority was to protect the minor priest at all costs, but reminded everyone that no sin went without punishment. With a sharp snap of his fingers, he summoned the palace guards and ordered the immediate arrest of both the minor priest and the Great Guardian. The guards acknowledged the command and began to move forward. Before they could reach them, a commotion erupted at the entrance of the Grand Hall. Shouts rang out as guards struggled to block someone forcing their way inside. Voices demanded that the intruder stop, only to realize in shock that the person pushing through was no ordinary servant. Amid the chaos, someone shouted for Elder Yin to move quickly. The massive doors burst open and the figure strode into the Grand Hall without hesitation. The sudden intrusion stunned everyone present. It was the 10th Elder, Yin Moha. Yin Moha apologized for her late arrival and explained that she had come to present critical evidence. With a surge of force energy, she sent a body floating into the center of the Grand Hall. Shock rippled through everyone present as they recognized it. Veins bulged unnaturally across the corpse. Parts of the flesh were scorched, yet the face was unmistakable. It was Young Bone, the second elder and leader of the Sword Sect. Cheon Yeowun's fury flared inwardly. He realized his precautions had failed. Despite ordering the body destroyed in the incinerator, it had somehow been recovered and brought here. The situation had slipped beyond his control. Before the hall could settle, chaos erupted at the entrance. A towering woman, taller than most men, seized a palace guard by the leg and swung him with brute force, smashing him into the others. Guards were sent flying as the formation at the gate collapsed. Yujong's thoughts spiraled. He had deliberately scattered the minor priest's forces, stripping Yeowun of allies. Yet these warriors were clearly not palace guards, nor were they part of any force he had accounted for. Yeowun watched calmly, a faint grin forming. The timing was perfect. These were forces the Patriarch knew nothing about. Though the academy had been shut down following Sir Lee's arrest, not everyone left behind there had been Yeowun's followers. Some loyalties had remained hidden, waiting for this exact moment. At the shattered gate, the woman stood her ground, cutting down anyone who tried to advance. Her presence alone halted the palace guards. She was Ho Sangwa, the fourth sword among Yeowun's 6 swords. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Until next time, happy watching.